Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take the sources you send us, the things you're curious about, and really dig into them.
Yep, we do the sifting so you get the core insights, those aha moments.
And today, wow, we have an extraordinary one. It's based on an interview you sent us with Titu Singh. He's now about 40, I believe.
That's right. And for almost his entire life, he's claimed to remember a past life.
As a man named Suresh, a shop owner in Agra who was murdered. The level of detail is just staggering.
It really is. And the source, this interview, lays out claims he made as a very young child, specific, verifiable details about this past life.
Which his family, understandably, didn't believe at first.
Right, who would? But then they started finding things out.
Exactly. And that's our mission for this deep dive. We know you, our listener, want to grasp these fascinating stories quickly, get the essence without wading through hours of research.
So we're going to extract the key parts of Titu's recollections, look at the corroborating details, the things that seem to match up, and explore the big questions this raises.
Questions about memory, who we are, maybe even existence itself.
Okay, so let's kick things off. The interview says Titu's very first memories weren't even of this life.
He described it as remembering his rebirth.
Yeah. And then, around age 2, imagine this, he starts telling his parents things.
Like, I'm not from here, and my name isn't Titu, it's Suresh.
And not just that. He says he owned a shop, Suresh Radio, in Agra.
Names his wife, Uma, mentions having 2 children.
And the most chilling part, that he was shot dead.
At age 2? That's unbelievable.
It is. And it wasn't vague. The interview highlights the sheer amount of detail. He'd argue with his parents, apparently.
Saying their house wasn't his, that he owned a car, even though his current family didn't have one.
All this starting around 1984, maybe up to 87, so he's about 4 or 5 years old when these claims are really consistent.
You can just imagine his parents. What do you even do with that?
Well, initially they dismissed it. You know, kids say things, right? Babbling.
Makes sense. But it didn't stop.
No. And eventually, Titu's older brother got curious, maybe a bit concerned too.
Because Titu just kept insisting on these same stories.
Right. So the brother decides to go to Agra himself and just ask around, see if any of it checks out.
Titu had mentioned being murdered, owning this, shop TVs, radios, VCRs, he said.
And his brother actually found people in Agra who confirmed it. They said, yes, a shop owner named Suresh was murdered, owned a shop just like that.
Wow. That must have been a shock for the family.
Absolutely. Suddenly, it's not just childhood fantasy. There's a real-world echo.
So things escalated from there.
They did. When Titu was about 6.5, his father took him to Agra.
His father was a lecturer, right? Organic chemistry. Based in Agra, conveniently.
Yes. So it wasn't just a random trip. It seems like the father needed to see for himself, get some answers.
And did they? What happened in Agra?
They went to the Suresh radio shop, and Titu apparently recognized it immediately.
Just walked up and knew it.
Knew it. And started pointing out changes. He said the counter was different, the photos on the wall were arranged differently.
And Suresh's widow, Uma, she was there.
She was. And she was reportedly stunned by these comments. Imagine hearing a little boy describe changes to your late husband's shop.
Apparently, when Titu's brother introduced him, Uma just said Suresh had died years ago. The confusion must have been immense.
And it's important, based on the interview, to understand how Titu remembered this stuff.
Right. It wasn't like watching a movie in his head.
No, not visions or flashbacks. He described it as a strong feeling, a deep knowing, a sense of having been murdered and just not belonging in his current life.
But still with specific details he couldn't possibly see at that moment.
Exactly. Like recalling his past house had glass doors, that Suresh was quite well off. Where does a 6-year-old get that?
It really makes you wonder. But his parents, even the educated father, didn't jump straight to reincarnation, did they?
No, not for a while. The interview mentions they were skeptical for about 2.5 years. They thought maybe he had some kind of issue or, again, just vivid imagination.
Understandable. So what was the actual turning point for them?
It seems to have been this recurring behavior. Titu would apparently grab his belongings and run after white cars.
White cars. White cars.
Because Suresh, the man he claimed to be, owned a white Fiat.
Ah, okay. So seeing these cars triggered something.
It seems so. This consistent, specific action finally pushed the family to think, okay, we need to investigate this more seriously.
Which leads us to the details of Suresh's actual murder, as Titu remembered it.
Yes. He recalled closing his shop, getting into his white Fiat to drive home to Shahganj.
His bungalow there.
Right. And he wasn't alone. He said 2 people were with him.
And then?
One greeted him, he said, and the other one shot him. just like that.
Yeah, do you remember why? The motive?
That part was apparently less clear to him. He mentioned possibilities like revenge or maybe something to do with past smuggling activities. Gold and silver were mentioned.
But he didn't want to elaborate on that.
No. He specifically said in the interview he wouldn't give more details on record, didn't want to cause problems for anyone potentially still involved.
That's considerate in a strange way, protecting people connected to his alleged past life's darker side.
It adds another layer, doesn't it? And the timing is just, well. Suresh was murdered in 1983.
And Titu was born when?
December 1983. There's a slight mention, it might have even been August, some detail about the hospital admission, but either way.
It's incredibly close. Months or even weeks between the death and the birth.
Makes you think, doesn't it, about continuity or lack thereof?
What happened to the killers, according to Titu?
He said they were caught by the police, went to jail, served their sentence. He was told later when they got out.
Did he ever encounter them again?
Astonishingly, yes. He describes meeting one of them at his current family's home.
No. When was this?
When he was about 8 years old. He said he recognized the person instantly.
And what did he do?
He ran away, terrified. Which seems like a pretty natural reaction if you believe you're face-to-face with your own murderer from a past life.
Okay, this is where, as the interviewer notes, you really have to acknowledge how unbelievable the whole thing sounds.
Absolutely. Especially if you come from a scientific perspective. The interviewer admits his own skepticism.
He tried to find logical explanations, right? Money, fame, maybe just a really elaborate imaginary friend phase.
Exactly. The usual counter-arguments for these kinds of cases.
But the interview pushes back on those.
It does. It points out Titu's family wasn't seeking fame or money. They apparently refused offers, turned things down.
And the father was even worried Titu might later try to claim Suresh's property. That doesn't sound like a motive for fraud.
Not at all. And the imaginary friend idea. Well, Titu grew up to be dean of yoga and naturopathy at a university.
Patanjali University, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't exactly fit the profile of someone lost in a childhood delusion.
It certainly challenges those easy dismissals. It forces you to at least consider the claims more deeply.
So what's Titu's own take on it all? Why does he think he remembers this?
He has his own theory based on his beliefs. He suggests that people who die unnaturally, untimely deaths.
Like Suresh, who is only 28.
Right. Their souls, he believes, don't achieve liberation immediately and might seek out a new body.
And some, like him perhaps, retain memories.
That's his idea. Memories of past karmas, actions and consequences, or maybe unfinished business.
He mentioned his past karmas were very bad.
He did, suggesting the memories might be linked to unresolved issues from Suresh's life. It's this concept that actions in one life can ripple into the next.
It's a framework. Whether one shares the belief or not, it's how he understands his own experience.
Yeah, provides a lens. So how does all this affect his current life? Does he feel like Suresh?
It seems not. Not really.
Yeah.
He acknowledges his current life, his wife, his son. He sees the past as the past.
So he doesn't dwell on it constantly.
Doesn't seem like it. He'll share details if asked, but he's not living in that previous identity. His contact with Suresh's family has also apparently decreased over time.
But there were still these connections, these corroborating details that came out later too, weren't there? Beyond just the childhood claims.
Oh, absolutely. Some really compelling ones mentioned in the interview. He told his current wife things that supposedly only Suresh and Uma would have known.
Like what?
Like specific shared experiences, going to a place called the Dolpur Fair, eating jalebi like a sweet snack on the bonnet of their car. Very intimate, personal details.
Things unlikely to be common knowledge or easily guessed.
Exactly. And then there's the incident with identifying Suresh's sons.
Great, tell me about that again.
Apparently, he was shown a group of about 20 children and was able to pick out Suresh's 2 sons.
Just like that. Pick them out of a crowd.
And not only that, he reportedly knew their ages relative to him in his past life. That's incredibly specific recognition.
That is remarkable. And then, perhaps the most striking physical evidence.
The birthmarks.
Yes, he has birthmarks on his right temple and the back of his head.
And the claim is they match Suresh's wounds.
That's what the interview states. It mentions BBC London looked into this, compared the marks to Suresh's post-mortem report.
And found they corresponded to the bullet's entry and exit wounds.
If that's accurate, that's powerful. Physical marks mirroring a past trauma, it really pushes the boundaries of what we think is possible.
It does. It forces you to ask, how could that happen?
Well,
Your coincidence seems stretched.
very stretched. Okay, so moving on from childhood and the initial investigation, what about Titu's life growing up?
Well, he got his education in Agra. Interestingly, he first wanted to join the Indian Army.
Oh, really? What happened?
His family said no. So instead, he went on to study in Tamil Nadu, learned English, and Tamil there.
And eventually, his path led him to where he is now.
Yes, Dean of Yoga and Naturopathy at Patanjali University. Quite a journey from that initial ambition.
It is. What about personality? Was there any connection noticed between young Titu and Suresh?
There was mention of that early on. People apparently observed that Titu had a short temper, much like Suresh was said to have.
Interesting. Does Titu see that connection himself?
He acknowledges he used to be short-tempered,
Yeah.
but he feels his profession, yoga and naturopathy plus time itself, has mellowed him out.
Makes sense. Has he ever talked about a purpose for this rebirth, for having these memories?
He touches on that. He suggests it might be about completing unfinished work from Suresh's life.
Unfinished work, like the potential smuggling ties.
Not necessarily that, more like fulfilling a positive purpose. He seems to view his current work education, promoting human welfare, as potentially being that fulfillment.
Finding meaning in the present through the lens of the past. What about the headaches? Some reports mention headaches around age 18 linked to the injury site.
He addressed that in the interview. He recalls having a boil or maybe a lump there around that time, but not significant headaches directly tied to the memories or the past injury itself.
Okay, so maybe that detail was slightly exaggerated in other accounts?
Possibly. So, wrapping up his perspective, what's his final message in the interview?
It's quite philosophical, really. He emphasizes doing good deeds, because life is unpredictable, and, well, rebirth might be a possibility.
A reminder to live well, given the uncertainty of it all.
Exactly. A thought-provoking end to his personal account.
Okay, so let's try and summarize this deep dive. We've gone through the incredible story of Titu Singh.
These detailed, consistent memories from childhood of being Suresh, a man murdered in Agra,
We've looked at how his family, initially skeptical, found corroborating details.
and how later investigations, even involving the BBC, seem to verify specific points, like those astonishing birthmarks matching the post-mortem report.
The whole case, as presented in this interview, raises profound questions, doesn't it, about memory, identity.
And the possibility of reincarnation, something many cultures believe in, but which is hard to grasp from a purely materialist viewpoint.
We hope this deep dive has given you, our listener, a solid grasp of this extraordinary story, a shortcut to understanding its complexities without you having to track down all the sources.
It's certainly one of those stories that sticks with you.
It really does. And maybe that leads to a final thought for everyone listening. Could there be aspects of our own lives, maybe fleeting feelings, odd moments of recognition, or skills we pick up easily that have deeper roots than we think?
Roots beyond our current experience. It's a fascinating question to ponder.
Titu Singh's story definitely invites us to consider our understanding of life itself.
Indeed.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll be back soon exploring more fascinating topics from the sources you send our way.